Brazil. Think beaches, samba, and maybe even top-notch Moscato. It sounds surprising, maybe. But this South American powerhouse has really carved out a significant space in the Moscato world.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, especially considering its success often comes in climates you wouldn't normally associate with this great, hot, humid sometimes. It's quite a story.
Definitely unexpected. And what's really fascinating is how this grape, so linked to cooler European spots, has not just survived but actually thrived in Brazil's diverse conditions.
It really says something about the grape's adaptability, doesn't it? And also the cleverness of the people growing it.
Exactly. So today, we're diving deep into that story, Moscato in Brazil, and we'll be focusing quite a bit on the incredible work of Embrapa, that's the Empresa Brasileira de Pesquisa Agropecuária, their agricultural research agency.
A key player for sure.
Think of this as your fast track to getting up to speed on a really compelling part of Brazilian winemaking. We'll look at how this aromatic grape adapted, the amazing range of wines it produces now, and, crucially, the science that made it all happen.
And, looking bigger picture, Embrapa's work really highlights how crucial scientific research is for, well, pushing agricultural boundaries. It lets places with unique climates become successful producers. Smart science making new things possible.
So our mission today is pretty clear. Pull out the key insights on Moscato and Embrapa. We want to show how that mix of science and Brazilian terroir created something, well, pretty special in the wine world. Okay, let's jump in. What is it about Moscato that just makes it so appealing everywhere?
I think the biggest thing is that smell, that unmistakable aroma. Moscato grapes just burst with these intense floral and fruity notes, like orange blossoms mixed with ripe peaches. It's very direct, very inviting.
Yeah, you smell it and you get it immediately.
Exactly. And that strong aromatic quality is a huge reason it works in so many different wine styles. It just offers this immediate pleasure that, well, lots of people connect with.
Like bottled sunshine and flowers, right. Okay, let's bring in Embrapa. What exactly is this organization and why is its role so vital for Brazilian grapes, especially Moscato?
Right, so Embrapa Uvi Vinho, their grape and wine division, is based down in the Saragossa. They're the leading research center for this stuff in Brazil. And their work is absolutely essential because, well, Brazil's climate is mostly tropical and subtropical.
Which isn't typically ideal for classic European grapes, I gather.
Not always, no. You're dealing with things like no real winter dormancy for the vines, consistently high temperatures, often high humidity too, and a big threat from fungal diseases. Those are serious hurdles.
That does sound challenging. So how did Embrapa approach these problems?
They took a really rigorous scientific path. Lots of research focused on developing grape varieties and vineyard methods specifically for these conditions. So targeted breeding programs, figuring out the best ways to manage the vineyards, and understanding how different grapes actually perform in Brazil's various growing spots.
So not just importing grapes, but actively breeding grapes for Brazil. Interesting. When did Moscato first show up in Brazil, and how was it initially used?
It mainly came over with European immigrants, and it first found a real home in the cooler Saragossa region in the south. Early on, the big focus was using it for light, fragrant, sparkling wines.
Ah, so the sparkling came first.
Yeah, those really caught on locally. People loved them. They became quite popular pretty quickly.
A Brazilian classic right from the start, almost. But how did Embrapa get involved in actually improving these Moscato vines?
Well, they saw the potential, right? The grape had great aroma, but also limitations because of the climate. So Embrapa started a dedicated genetic improvement program. The goals were clear. Breed varieties that could handle Brazil's environment better, give growers better yields, but crucially, keep that high aromatic quality people loved about Moscato.
Okay, so how do you actually do that? Create improved varieties? Sounds complex.
It is, yeah, it's quite sophisticated. Embrapa's strategy involved crossing traditional Moscato varieties, the ones valued for aroma, with other grapes. Sometimes American varieties, sometimes hybrids that had traits they wanted, like strong disease resistance or better adaptation to different soils and climates.
So mixing and matching genetic traits.
Exactly. And after making those crosses, it takes years of really careful evaluation, field testing in different wine regions across Brazil to see how these new combinations actually perform in the real world.
Makes sense. It's a long game. So what are some of the key Moscato varieties that Embrapa either developed or significantly worked on?
Okay, several are important. First, there's Moscato Branco, specifically a clone called IAC 139811. Now, Embrapa didn't create this one, but it's a really important clone they've studied extensively and used a lot in their breeding work. It's known for those classic floral, fruity aromas and gets used in various wine styles.
Moscato Branco, a cornerstone then. What else?
Then you've got Moscato Giallo. This one's shown amazing adaptability in different Brazilian terroirs, and it has really intense, complex aromas. Think floral notes, but also citrus, honey, maybe even a little spice. What's interesting is it shows potential for both dry and sweet wines.
Dry Moscato. That keeps popping up. It really challenges the usual perception, doesn't it?
It does. And that really speaks to the innovation happening. Another key one is Moscato de Alexandria. Famous worldwide, right? Raisins, orange blossoms, honey aromas. Embrapa's worked on adapting it specifically for Brazil, for both wines and even grape juice.
So refining established names, what about brand new varieties they've bred?
Right. That brings us to the Série Moscato. This is a big, ongoing breeding program at Embrapa. The whole point is to create totally new varieties through specific crosses. They want to combine Moscato's signature smell with better disease resistance and adaptability for Brazil.
So that's where the latest developments are coming from.
Pretty much. The specific commercial names of the very newest ones for big release might not always be shouted from the rooftops immediately, but that Série Moscato program is really driving the innovation forward.
Okay, the Série Moscato sounds fascinating, like the real cutting edge. Let's get a bit more technical, maybe.
Yeah.
What are some of the key botanical characteristics of these Embrapa Moscato varieties? What do the vines actually look like?
Sure, we can talk ampelography.
Yeah.
That's the fancy term for describing the vine. So things like the leaves. They can vary in size, shape, how many lobes they have, how green they are, even whether they have little hairs underneath. These details help identify the variety, but also affect things like how much sun hits the leaves.
Okay, leaf details matter. What about the actual fruit, the clusters and berries?
The clusters are usually medium to large, often kind of cone-shaped.
Yeah.
How tightly packed the berries are can vary, which matters for airflow and reducing disease risk. The berries themselves. Generally small to medium, roundish, or maybe slightly oval. The skin's usually thin, changes color as it ripens, of course. And the pulp, that's the key part, is juicy and packed with those distinctive muscat flavors. Honey, orange blossom, citrus, the good stuff.
You can almost taste them just hearing about it. How do these varieties handle the growing season in Brazil's different climate zones? You mentioned that varies quite a bit.
It does. The whole vegetative cycle, the timing of things like bud break, flowering, when the grapes change color, varies all, and final ripening, it's adapted. So up in the tropical Vale de San Francisco, the cycle can be pretty short. They might even get 2 harvests a year sometimes, which is really unusual.
Wow, 2 harvests.
Yeah. Down in the Serra Gaúcha, which is more subtropical, the cycle is longer. Grapes ripen typically in the summer. Understanding these regional differences in the vine's rhythm is crucial for managing the vineyard well.
It's amazing how the same basic grape type can adjust like that. You mentioned disease resistance was a big goal for Embrapa. How successful were they with that?
Oh, hugely successful. That's been a major focus and a real win. The breeding program prioritized resistance to major fungal problems like downy mildew and powdery mildew, and the result is that growers need fewer chemical sprays, which is great for sustainability.
A big plus for the environment and the farmers.
Yeah, definitely. And they also continuously check how resistant new varieties are to specific local pests, too.
And what about handling different soils and climates across Brazil? How versatile are these Embrapa Moscato varieties?
They've shown impressive versatility, actually. Take the Valle de San Francisco irrigated sandy soils. There, they can get really high sugar levels, which is good for certain wine styles. Then look at the Serra Gaúcha, more clay in the soil, bigger temperature swings. There, the grapes tend to develop more balanced acidity and maybe more complex aromas. This ability to adapt to different terroirs is a real strength.
Okay, so Embrapa delivers these well-adapted grapes. What are the best ways to actually grow them to get the best quality? What do they recommend?
Well, it starts with picking the right spot, obviously. Good drainage, deep soils, that's key. Growers need to test their soil, fix nutrient levels or pH if needed, and preparing the ground properly, things like subsoiling to break up compacted layers, plowing, adding organic matter that sets the vines up for success.
Good foundations. And how are the vines typically trained or managed above ground?
The espalier system, you might know it as vertical shoot positioning, or VSP, is often recommended. It helps control how vigorously the vine grows and make sure the grape bunches get good sun and air exposure.
Right, VSP, I've seen that.
Yeah. Though in really sunny places, they might use the latata or pergola system to give the grapes a bit of shade. Then there's pruning, which is critical. Winter pruning controls the number of buds, so the potential yield. And summer pruning, things like thinning out shoots, removing some leaves, maybe even dropping some grape clusters that helps create the perfect little microclimate around the grapes. better ripening, less disease.
It sounds like a constant fine-tuning process in the vineyard. What about water and feeding the vines?
Consistent water is vital, especially in those tropical and subtropical areas where rain isn't always reliable, so irrigation is often necessary. And fertigation feeding nutrients through the irrigation system is a really efficient way to give the vines exactly what they need when they need it.
Got it. And finally, how do growers deal with those pests and diseases we talked about, even with resistant varieties?
Right, so Embrapa really pushes integrated pest and disease management, IPM. It's a whole package.
Right.
Using those resistant varieties is step one. Then, carefully monitoring the vineyard, using good cultural practices like canopy management to reduce risk, and only using pesticides strategically when absolutely necessary.
So a less is more approach to chemical.
Exactly. The whole philosophy is about sustainable vineyard management, conserving soil and water, boosting biodiversity, cutting back on synthetic stuff, and just thinking long-term ecological balance.
It's clear Embrapa's support goes way beyond just the grapes themselves. It's a whole system. Okay, now the part wine lovers are waiting for, the wines. What's the potential of these Moscato Embrapa grapes in the winery? What can they make?
Oh, the potential is huge, really. We've touched on it. But they can make a really diverse range of high-quality wines. That basic aromatic profile, white flowers, fresh peach, lychee, citrus, it's a fantastic starting point. But what's really exciting is moving beyond just the traditional sweet styles.
Okay, let's tackle that surprising one first. Dry white wines from Moscato. What are they like?
They can be wonderfully crisp, aromatic. They keep those lovely floral and fruity notes, but they have this vibrant acidity. Makes them fantastic aperitifs or great with lighter food. It's a really different but compelling way to see Moscato.
Definitely changes how I think about Moscato. Okay, what about the more familiar styles, the sweet and dessert wines?
Embrapa's work has boosted the potential there too, for sure. These adapted varieties can get really high sugar levels when ripe, which is exactly what you need for rich, complex, sweet wines, especially if winemakers use techniques like late harvesting or carefully controlling the fermentation.
And we absolutely have to talk about the Brazilian Moscato sparkling wines. What makes them special?
Yeah, these are arguably the flagship style for Brazilian Moscato. They're typically light, beautifully balanced, sweet, but not too sweet, low in alcohol, and just bursting with aroma. Often made using the Charmat method or sometimes the Asti method. They're known for high quality and are super popular both in Brazil and increasingly internationally.
It sounds like the specific choice of Moscato Embrapa variety can also influence the final wine, right? How does that play out?
Absolutely. Different Embrapa selections have slightly different aroma profiles. One might be more floral, another more citrusy, another more peachy. So winemakers can choose specific varieties or blend them to craft wines with really distinct personalities.
So picking the right grape clone is step one in designing the wine. Once the grapes are picked, what are the key winemaking steps Embrapa recommends?
They offer detailed guidelines depending on the style. For getting the juice ready, the must preparation they might suggest, say, short cold soak for dry whites to pull more aroma from the skins. Then, gentle pressing and clarifying the juice, maybe by letting it settle or using flotation to get it really clean before fermentation.
And I assume the yeast choice is pretty important too.
Oh, absolutely critical. They recommend using specific yeast strains that are known to preserve or even boost those fruity and floral Moscato aromas. And keeping the fermentation temperature low, usually around 12 to 16 degrees Celsius, so quite cool, is really important for holding onto those delicate aromatic compounds.
How do they make sure those signature aromas don't just, disappear during the process?
Good question. For sparkling wines, a common trick is to stop the fermentation early by chilling the wine way down. This leaves some natural sugar for sweetness and traps those volatile aromas in the wine. For dry whites, using stainless steel tanks and keeping oxygen away as much as possible helps preserve that freshness and aromatic intensity.
What about aging? Do these wines spend time in barrels?
Generally, no. Most Moscato and Embrapa wines are really meant to be enjoyed young and fresh to get the full impact of those primary aromas. Aging in oak barrels tends to mask those delicate muscat notes. You might see some sweet wines age briefly in stainless steel or maybe get very limited, specific contact with neutral oak just for a bit of texture, but it's not the norm.
Okay, freshness is key. And finally, how do they ensure consistent quality bottle after bottle?
Quality control is a big focus, right from when the grapes come in until the wine's bottled. They do physical and chemical checks, acidity, sugar, alcohol levels, but also a sensory analysis. Trained tasters evaluate the wines to make sure they meet quality standards and really taste like Moscato should.
Okay, so we know how they're made. Now, where are they made? Which parts of Brazil are really known for using these Moscato Embrapa grapes?
Several key regions really stand out. The Vale do San Francisco is fascinating. That unique tropical setup, irrigation, potential for two harvests. They produce intensely aromatic still and sparkling wines there.
That double harvest potential is just wild in the wine context. Where else is important?
The Saragucha, definitely. It has a longer winemaking history, a cooler climate. It's really known for top-quality Moscato sparkling wines. Delicate, fresh, complex aromas are the hallmarks there.
Are there other, maybe newer regions getting into Moscato Embrapa?
Yes, definitely. We're seeing really interesting things happening in places like Santa Catarina, Paraná, Minas Gerais, even São Paulo. These areas have promising subtropical microclimates, and it's allowing for even more diversification in Brazilian Moscato styles.
It sounds like terroir, that whole combination of soil, climate, place, really makes a difference in how Moscato Embrapa tastes from region to region.
Oh, absolutely. Terroir is huge. In the warmer Valle de San Francisco, maybe you get riper fruit notes, crispness. In the cooler Serra Gaúcha, perhaps more aromatic complexity, more zingy acidity. And importantly, lots of wineries, big and small, are getting recognized for these wines in competitions, both in Brazil and internationally.
That's great to hear about the recognition. Okay, let's get to the tasting notes. For listeners eager to try these, can you describe the different styles? Paint us a picture.
Let's start with the dry whites. Visually, often pale straw, maybe greenish glints, nose. Classic white flowers, jasmine, honeysuckle plus fresh fruits like white peach, pear, maybe some zesty citrus like lemon peel. Palate, usually light-bodied, nice refreshing acidity. Those fruity floral flavors come through at a clean finish. Really good with light salads, seafood, fresh cheeses.
Sounds delicious and refreshing. What about the super popular sparkling Moscato?
Okay, sparkling, usually pale yellow, lots of fine persistent bubbles. The smell is just exuberant. Orange blossom, peach, maybe like in syrup, a bit of honey, and that unmistakable fried grape scent. Taste-wise, it's sweet, but balanced by that lovely refreshing acidity so it's not sticky. Light, fizzy, perfect as an aperitif or with light fruit desserts cakes.
And for something richer, the sweet wines from Moscato Embrapa.
Right, the sweet or dessert styles. They tend to look a bit deeper, more golden. Aromas get richer too, dried apricot, honey, candied orange peel, maybe more mature floral notes. On the palate, they're denser, more opulent sweetness, but again, balanced by good acidity. Leads to a long, satisfying finish. Think pairings like rich desserts, blue cheese, even foie gras.
Wow, quite a range. Any quick tips for tasting these wines to get the best experience?
Sure. Temperature matters. Serve the dry and sparkling ones well chilled. Sweet ones may be slightly less cold. Use the right glass standard white wine glass for dry, flute, or coupe for sparkling. Helps capture the aromas. And, use all your senses. Look at the color. Really sniff the aromas. Then savor the taste.
Great advice. Now let's get specific for food lovers, especially those interested in Brazilian cuisine. How did these wines pair with typical Brazilian dishes?
Oh, the versatility is fantastic here. For those dry white Moscato Embrapa wines, think about lighter Brazilian dishes. Salads with tropical fruits and queijo branco, that fresh white cheese. Maybe a lighter moqueca, the seafood stew made with less palm oil. Grilled white fish with passion fruit sauce, perfect. Shrimp scampi, fresh oysters, all good matches.
Sounds like some lovely pairings. What about the sparkling Moscato with Brazilian food?
Sparkling Moscato loves Brazilian desserts. Think classics like bolo de rolo, that rolled cake, or pudim de leite condensado, the flan, fruit pavé, rabanada, which is like Brazilian French toast ambrosia, even just fresh fruit salads. It also works surprisingly well with lighter savory things like pâtés or slightly sweet canapés.
Okay, saving room for dessert. And the sweeter Moscato wines, any classic Brazilian pairings?
For the really sweet ones, you have to try Romeo y Julieta, that combo of guava paste and cheese. It's iconic. They're also great with things like quindim, the coconut custard, or cocada, coconut candy. And like we said, they can handle richer things like blue cheese too. Really, the key is that aromatic punch and good acidity. It makes Moscato surprisingly food-friendly.
This has been incredibly insightful and made me quite hungry. To wrap things up, what's next for Embrapa and Moscato in Brazil? What are they working on now?
Well, they're definitely not resting on their laurels. Embrapa is still deeply committed to pushing Moscato forward. One big area is expanding their germplasm collection, basically, their library of grape genes. They're always looking for or breeding even better varieties and clones, more disease-resistant, better suited to climate change, maybe even more complex aromas.
So always refining. What other big focuses?
Climate change adaptation is huge, obviously. Breeding for drought and heat tolerance is key. Also promoting sustainable practices, water efficiency, fewer chemicals, boosting biodiversity in the vineyards, and finally, getting the knowledge out there. Technology transfer, supporting growers and winemakers through courses, field days, publications, digital tools. That's crucial.
It's absolutely clear that Embrapa has been and still is the engine behind Moscato's success story in Brazil.
Absolutely. They really changed the game, allowing Moscato to thrive in all these different climates through their science-backed varieties and technical know-how.
And it's exciting to see Brazilian Moscato gaining recognition for more than just sweet fizz, right? That whole spectrum of style.
Exactly. The fact that these Embrapa varieties adapt so well to different terroirs and create such diverse wines, it points to a really bright future for Moscato in Brazil. I think we can expect continued growth, more innovation, and definitely more global recognition for the quality and unique character of these wines.
So after exploring this whole fascinating world of Moscato and Brapa with us, here's something for you to think about. Which style of Brazilian Moscato wine are you most curious to try now? Is it the classic sparkling, the surprising dry white, or maybe a rich sweet one? What piqued your interest the most? It's a whole side of Brazilian wine just waiting to be discovered.